Everyone, Dr. B here. Thank you so much again for joining me for another episode of Ask the Dentist. Small bite today. Gum chewing. Pretty simple topic, right? Most of us like to gum chew. I'm not a big gum chewer. I read this data, these studies that I'm going to cite here, and we're going to talk a little bit in depth about what kind of gum, when to chew it, as it relates to suppressing cavities. And there are going to be some things in this discussion that are going to blow your mind, especially if you are a parent and you are expecting or you have young children under the age of 10. So listen up. This is great. I wish I had known this when my kids were young. This data is pretty old, late 80s to late 90s. That's the date range for the studies that I'm going to cite here. So I don't know if any of you remember, but back in the old days, there was that 4 out of 5 dentists recommend Trident gum. That's not what we're talking about here. That is garbage. That has artificial sweeteners in it, like saccharin, and that's not good for you. It causes brain damage. It has other chemicals in it, and there's no therapeutic effect. And in fact, when I was a younger dentist, I was worried with my patients that were grinding a lot, had a lot of myofascial pain, tightness of the muscles, clicking and popping of the joint. I did not want them to chew gum. That just made it worse. But in general, gum chewing, as long as it has this one active ingredient in it, is actually very good for you. It will make a big difference in your oral health. And this ingredient is xylitol. It is a wood sugar. Everyone's heard of xylitol. It's in toothpaste. It is in gum. There are 2 different sources of xylitol, some controversy there. I'm going to try and clear that up at the end of this discussion. I love xylitol. If I were to formulate a toothpaste, probably the first ingredient would be xylitol, and it would be the synthetic form. And I'll explain later why. Xylitol does many things. It's sweet. It tastes wonderful. It's not caloric. You can bake with it. It is a FODMAP food, so if you have that issue, you will get gas from it. Obviously, it's bad for your pets because they can't process it. It doesn't mean it's bad for humans. And be clear that when I'm talking about xylitol, I'm not talking about swallowing it or ingesting it. I'm talking about releasing it in the mouth for a few minutes, 5 to 6 times a day for a desired effect. All right, so what's going to blow your mind here? It blew mine. Again, first it blew my mind that this data is old, and that we aren't having this discussion as dentists with our patients, with our parents to be. Number one comment I get on Instagram or question is from a mom, sometimes a dad, sometimes both. I've done everything you've recommended. I'm flossing my kids' teeth. They don't eat goldfish crackers. They don't have a dry mouth. Their mouth is closed at night, et cetera, et cetera. And the dentist said, my kid, maybe he's 2 or 3 or 4 years old, has 5 or 6 or 7 cavities. They have to be put under, and it's very, very expensive. So here is one very easy, inexpensive solution to preventing that. Chew xylitol gum. Have your children chew xylitol gum. Here's the part. The other thing that blew my mind is the mother. And again, I don't know why the studies are based on moms. There's no mention of dads, but again, no harm in having dad. Any caregiver, that's how I would recommend it. Any caregiver, whether it's a nanny, doesn't matter if it's male or female, anyone that spends, grandparents, for example, make sure that all the caregivers of that child are chewing xylitol gum while tending to the child for many, many years. I'll talk a little bit about that. Here's another thing that is very interesting. Don't start chewing the gum when the baby is born. Start chewing the gum before baby is born. The therapeutic effect is quite pronounced if, let's stick with the mom as an example, but consider that list I just gave you of all caregivers. If mom is chewing gum for a year before the first baby tooth erupts, the reduction in the incidence of decay is phenomenal. I'm going to give you some numbers. It is, and the degree of confidence in these studies is quite high, 95, 98%. I'll just come out with it. The reduction can be up to 93%. That's almost a perfect score. just by chewing gum, just by mom chewing gum or the caregivers chewing gum. And then there's a delayed effect. In other words, once mom and kid stops chewing gum at a certain age, there are all sorts of different degrees of that in these studies, there is a residual effect for the following 5 years. So anyway, I'm just going to go through some of the data. I'm going to list all these studies in the show notes so you can look through it for yourself, especially if you're a provider. And then we're all going to wonder, whether you're a provider or a parent, why aren't we having this discussion? We're talking about brushing and flossing. We're talking about eating well. Don't eat junk food. We're talking about dry mouth. Even that discussion is not, 90% of that discussion is not being had, unless you're seeing a functional dentist, of course. So typically it's just brushing and flossing. And then when you come in and your child has all these cavities, you're told, well, you didn't brush, you didn't floss. Getting a cavity is a multifactorial thing. It's not just one thing. So don't let any dentist shame you or hygienist shame you into thinking that this was your fault. A lot of dental healthcare providers are shaming moms for breastfeeding too long. They're saying that that caused the decay. Here's a tip. Here's a tip for everyone. Let's get past the shaming. Here's a tip for everyone. Chew gum, xylitol gum, a clean, safe version of it. I'm going to make a recommendation here soon. And chew it before your kid is born, or before, maybe after your kid is born, and before the teeth erupt. And so how does this work? Just a quick, before I get into the data here, just the numbers. How does that work? Well, xylitol has, we've known this for a long time. Xylitol suppresses, doesn't kill. It takes away one of the functions that the cavity causing bug, there are many, but the big player is the S. mutan bug. This is, the S. mutan bug was described to me and discussed in dental school in the 80s. So this is nothing new, but it wasn't, we didn't talk about the xylitol connection. We didn't talk about why the strep mutant bug was so virulent when it came to causing cavities. It has legs. It has sticky little arms. Kind of think of it as like an octopus with sticky little suction cups. It can stick to the tooth surface, even though there's a biofilm on this inanimate, smooth, hard object. And that's what the body does. It's trying to protect that object by putting a biofilm on it. And in the biofilm are bugs and enzymes and pathways to bring in minerals to help remineralize teeth. And again, the body is aware of this bug. And even if you're healthy and don't have cavities, you have this bug. But if you're getting a lot of cavities, this bug is running amok. It is out of control. And for some reason, it is outproducing, and it's a bully in the community, and it's doing a lot of damage. And the other bugs aren't able to suppress the activity of that bug. Here's where xylitol comes in. Chewing xylitol, you're releasing the xylitol in the mouth. Xylitol takes away that stickiness factor. It prevents the S. mutan bug from sticking as effectively to the tooth surface. You don't want that bug right there because it's grabbing, let's say you had a starchy meal and then it consumes that fermentable carbohydrate, very highly processed, easily digestible food, and the result of that, the excrement or of that metabolic moment or incident of eating is highly acidic, low pH, a very dissolving atmosphere or liquid that literally leaches the minerals out of the tooth. And if the bug is right there in a colony or thick biofilm or plaque layer, that's the older term, then it's basically boring a hole in that one area. Take away the stickiness, the bugs are going to float around. They're not able to stick to one area. They're not able to colonize as well. And the chance that you're going to get that boring, think of a mine, like a gold mine, and you're not going to have that repeated attack in one specific location on a tooth where the body can't keep up and keep feeding it and remineralizing it so it doesn't become a cavity. Xylitol does that. Pretty amazing, right? Okay, let's talk about some of these studies. Let me just switch screens here. First study concludes that for long-term cavity prevention, For those effects to be maximized, habitual xylitol gum chewing should be started at least 1 year before permanent tooth eruption. Okay, we talked about that, but anyway, it's right here. I'm going to include all the links for these studies. This is a 1999 study, pretty recent. I mean, relative to the list of dates that I gave to you a few minutes ago. Anyway, a few highlights here. Anyway, typically these studies are one group of kids is given the xylitol gum, or mom is given xylitol gum that has a specific age range of kids, and then there's the group that doesn't chew xylitol gum. There's a lot of mixing of sorbitol and other things in there, but I'll let you know if that happens. These are, if I'm talking about xylitol, it's 100% xylitol. But the concentration of xylitol may not be 100%, but they're only basing it on the one ingredient of xylitol. So here in this study, 5 years after the 2-year program of habitual gum chewing, after that period ended, 288 children were re-examined. That's 5 years after the gum chewing stopped, and compared with the no gum group. And here they mixed sorbitol, xylitol gums with a xylitol gum and no gum. So there were 3 groups. Anyway, the long-term effect, this is a 95% confidence interval. Xylitol gum, and to a lesser extent, the xylitol-sorbitol combination had a preventative effect. Here are the numbers. During the 5 years after habitual gum chewing ended, xylitol gum, xylitol only, they reduced the caries risk by 60%. Xylitol-sorbitol were a little bit less, 44%. I'm not a big fan of sorbitol, by the way. Just stick with xylitol. It does the best. It's the safest. And then xylitol, okay, then the long-term caries risk reduction associated with xylitol strongly depended on when teeth erupted. This is interesting. Teeth that erupted after 1 year of gum chewing, after the 2-year habitual gum use ended, long-term caries risk was reduced by 93%. I mean, you should be grabbing for that box of xylitol gum right now. Teeth that erupted before the gum chewing started. In other words, there were teeth present and the child started gum chewing after the tooth was present, had no significant long-term preventative effect. So it's really about having it on board, and not a day before, but well before, so that xylitol has a chance to modulate and strip the S-mutan bugs of this sticky, grabbing the tooth surface and glomming on to one area, of reducing that effect. It takes time. And based on the studies, I would say between 6 and 12 months for that modulation to occur. Again, this is why it's so important to talk about the oral microbiome. It's all about the oral microbiome. Next study. Okay. There were 2 experimental groups. One used gum that had a 15% concentration of xylitol, and the other one had a 65% concentration of xylitol. Anyway, the effect was remarkable. Chewing xylitol gum had a beneficial effect on the caries, on the cavity forming process, for all types of tooth surfaces, in between tooth surfaces, smooth surfaces, the grooves. But chewing gum with a higher xylitol content had an additional positive effect on the buccal lingual surfaces. What is that? That's on the side of the teeth, the cheek side and the tongue side. That's important. So these effects vary throughout the micro niches in the mouth. It's not an even effect. So obviously you want to chew the 65% version, and yeah, the higher the content, the better. I think it would be. I would start at a 60-70% concentration. And I haven't found a 100% concentration of xylitol in gum yet, but I'm working on it. But anyway, it has to be strong gum. So the point is, any xylitol gum may not do the trick in all areas of the mouth. Interesting, in this study, there was a questionnaire asking the participants after the fact about stomach pain. And unequivocally in the questionnaire, no one complained about any kind of stomach pain. And that is one of the potential side effects, especially if you swallow xylitol. It can give you gas. It's hard. It's an undigestible. It's a prebiotic. So that was encouraging. Okay, another study. Let me just go through these, just trying to illustrate how the studies kind of support these ideas that I'm presenting. The 5-year follow-up. Let's talk about that. This is long-term effect of xylitol chewing gum in the long-term effect of xylitol chewing gum in the prevention of dental caries, a follow-up of 5 years after termination of the prevention program. I mentioned this earlier. This was an X and C group. There was a Y group, but the X group was the group that was chewing a pure xylitol gum. They didn't mention concentration in this study, which they had. And even though, so for 2 years, but 5 years after the ceasing of chewing gum, the X group continued to increase in the data points for reduction of caries actually increased a little bit. They didn't lessen over time. They actually increased a little bit. So there was this long-term effect, which is amazing. To me, that tells me that the oral microbiome had been modulated to the point where it was able to take care of itself. It just needed that boost from chewing xylitol gum for 2 years. So it's kind of a head start for the oral microbiome. Remember, I said earlier, the oral microbiome of children is much different than adults. It's less focused. It's not doing as good of a job. It's trying to find itself. It's trying to figure out where it should be in terms of being able to do its job. What else does this study say, especially on those teeth that erupted? Okay, that's that. And then there's the effect of xylitol on growth. Okay, that's something different. So, okay, I hope that demonstrates that there are studies that support this. And again, 65% concentration is better. There's a residual effect, and it's probably has something to do with helping the oral microbiome do its job. And this is for moms chewing, or any caregiver chewing gum before the teeth erupt. It's also the child chewing gum. So let's leave that behind us. Let's talk about the practical application of chewing xylitol gum. How much xylitol should I use? There was some older research with xylitol that specified an amount of 6 to 10 grams as being the sweet spot. And then that was in the 70s. Then that is now discounted. It's not about the amount necessarily, although I think the 65% is important. Based on that one study, the sweet spot is frequency, not amount. So new research has actually shown better how to use xylitol, and that is that quantity is not the most important thing, the number of exposures throughout the day. We want to get at least 4 to 5 exposures of, here it says in this study, 100% xylitol spread throughout the day. Interesting how, I mean, that should remind you of something. In dentistry, we're not so worried about sugar. I mean, we should be, but when it comes to causing cavities, if you were to eat all the sugar in one moment, you probably would never get a cavity. We talk about the frequency and the quantity. You can eat as much as you want, eat the Halloween candy in a 5 or 10 minute sitting, you should be okay. Eating or drinking a sugary drink, sugary food, over time, every hour on the hour, snacking on it, sipping on a kombucha or a sweetened beverage, a soda, it's frequency. It's not the quantity. It's the frequency that gives you the cavity. So conversely, it's the frequency of the exposure to xylitol and its effect, its therapeutic effect on reducing cavities. No surprise there, but I thought I would add that. Sorbitol, malitol, these are other sweeteners. They have not demonstrated the effect that xylitol has. So I would definitely just stick with xylitol. And most gums are xylitol based. And xylitol tastes better than sorbitol. Sorbitol doesn't taste very good. Malitol, not great. Xylitol has a very pleasant taste. And then remember that we're trying to starve the bacteria, and by providing all of those other sugars that feed the bacteria makes that job that much more difficult, right? So rather than thinking in terms of how much, I'm talking about sugar, think in terms of how often. And that goes for the amount of sugar you eat, but it's also, think about it in terms of how much you expose your mouth to xylitol or the oral microbiome. Again, it is not necessarily the quantity. Quantity is partially important, but the frequency is key. So where does that lead us to? How often should I use xylitol? There was an interesting term in one of the studies. It said strive for 5. I thought that was kind of cool. So essentially what the study said is that when you wake up in the morning, and this is if you're a mom and you're trying to prevent your kids from having decay, you're trying to get your oral microbiome in a position where that when it does get shared with your kid, it is optimal, and you're getting that benefit. That child is getting the benefit of being able to tame the S. mutant bugs. So real quickly, after breakfast, before breakfast, doesn't matter, but let's say after, to keep it simple, after breakfast, after lunch, after dinner, before bed. If you're going to strive for 5, maybe right when you get up. So those are the 5 times: right when you get up, after breakfast. If you're intermittent fasting, just pick any time. It doesn't matter. Maybe by the time you get to work, chew, or maybe while you're driving to work. Just space it out so that it's even, pretty much even, 5 or 6 times, 4 or 5 or 6 exposures to xylitol gum during the day. And if your kid has teeth and is wanting to chew gum and likes xylitol gum, have them chewed as well, kind of in the same pattern. If you are, I've always liked xylitol gum for people that will do apple cider vinegar in the morning, drink lots of coffee. In the evening, they're drinking wine or kombuchas, these acidic drinks. Instead of brushing, chew gum, drink a high pH mineral water, natural spring water. These are all things that will buffer the pH of those acidic drinks. That's direct exposure to acid-producing drinks. If your kids are snacking on something, let's say at school, don't send them to school with a toothbrush. It's not going to happen. They're going to get they'll be ridiculed for, telling them, oh, my mom or dad said I should brush my teeth after lunch. Just give them some cool gum to chew on. Almost has the same effect. In many ways, it could be better. And also the compliance will be much higher. So if you're afraid of an acid attack, either from eating junk food and the bacteria like the S. mutant bug, destroying the teeth or dissolving the calcium in that area, the xylitol gum will lessen that effect by up to 95%. You saw that study. And then if you can, and let's direct this advice to the parents, floss before you chew the gum, if you can. Doesn't have to be 5 or 6 times a day. But let's say you chew the xylitol gum when you wake up, floss before you chew the gum. If you have the opportunity to chew the gum, to floss before you chew the gum, not after. This allows the effect of xylitol to get in between the teeth and to more of those strep mutant bugs in the biofilm. So strive for 5, very cute. Flossing. Anyway, I think that's all I've got to say. We were going to talk about the source of xylitol. Let me mention that briefly. But before I do, I wanted to add one other thing, just a little extra, a little bonus here. I recommend the X-Clear. I'll put a link in the show notes. It's on our store. That's the spray that has xylitol in it, nasal spray. It's the only spray I would consider using, unless you have some very serious need for decongestants, that kind of thing. By the way, Benadryl and Sudafed don't work. That was something that we thought that we approved back in the late 30s. And now we have found, like fluoride, we have found, based on very old data, that there is no effect, maybe a placebo effect at best. So, but xylitol, squirting that up the nose, little grapefruit extract in there as well, very natural spray, that actually reduces the growth of another bug, the S. pneumoniae, in the nasopharynx, in the nasal passages. And it could also reduce the carriage or the transference of this pathogen to the lungs and to the nasopharynx and cause pneumonia. Amazing, right? So xylitol has a lot of benefit. Gear up with xylitol. Get the X-Clear. get the xylitol gum, make sure it's in your toothpaste. So xylitol has some amazing benefit, and it's natural. Anyway, let's talk about the sources of xylitol, because there is some controversy for that. And again, but I'm not worried about xylitol, but I'll tell you which form of it I'm most fond of.